Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. So happy to have you here joining me for another video. Happy Halloween! First of all, I really have to apologize again, and I feel like I'm apologizing a lot recently for being so inconsistent with my uploads. It's just like there's a lot going on, work, and I'm trying to lose some weight, and I'm gonna move to a new apartment in a few weeks, so it's like everything is a bit all over the place currently, but I'm really trying to better myself. I already made a plan for next year. I also really want to bring back the German videos as well, but currently there's just like no time for it, unfortunately. It was at least my goal to have another video for Halloween. So now I'm sitting here, it is October 30th, and this video is either gonna be up today or tomorrow. So at least I made that happen. So today we're gonna be talking about the tragic and completely unnecessary murder of 16-year-old Cassie Jo Stoddart, who has been brutally killed while house sitting for her relatives, and she was killed by two of her classmates, whose only motive was to be famous, like famous serial killers, and especially they wanted to create their own horror movie, just like the movie Scream. Cassie Jo Stoddart was born on December 21st, 1989 in Pocatello, Idaho. She was the middle child, and she had a younger brother and an older sister as well. During most part of her childhood, Cassie would have grown up with her grandparents, like she would live at her grandparents' house. I am not entirely sure as to why she was not living with her parents at that time, but I guess like maybe they were working a lot, or they just, it was more convenient for her staying with her grandparents. Nevertheless, Cassie was close to all of her family. She was especially very close to her mother, as well as her aunt and uncle. By the time of her murder, Cassie was a 16-year-old junior in Pocatello High School, and this is where she also met her boyfriend at that time. His name was Matt, and they had been together for about 5 months when the tragic events we will be talking about in a second happened. During the summer of 2006, Cassie, who was 16 at the time, as I said, of course she was dreaming of buying her own car, like most 16-year-olds would. And so in the summer of 2006, she would take on like some small jobs, mostly like babysitting, in order to make some of her own money, so she can eventually afford buying that car for herself. Cassie's aunt and uncle, her aunt's name was Allison and her uncle's name was Frank, who she also was very close with, they owned a nice very big house in northeast Bannock County, and sometimes they would like go for a weekend away, like maybe they had somewhere to be, like essentially, or they would go for like a little vacation. And on the weekend of September 22nd, 2006, this was also one weekend where they would be away, and they asked Cassie if she could come over and take care of the house, essentially house sit, and also take care of the animals, because they had some pets. They had, I think, 3 cats and 2 dogs in the house, so they needed somebody to take care of them. So Cassie, of course, she was on one side like extremely close to her family. She would want to help out, and she would want to like show them she could take on like some responsibility, and on the other hand, she would be able to make some extra money for her car she wanted to buy. So of course Cassie agreed, and on the evening of September 22nd, 2006, her mother dropped her at her aunt and uncle's house. Since Cassie did not feel like she wanted to stay all by herself the entire weekend, she asked her aunt if it would be fine if her boyfriend Matt would come over for the evening, so they could have like a little movie night together. And of course her aunt, she agreed, because she knew Matt and she knew that everything was gonna be fine. Matt, however, he did not come alone to the house. Along with him, he invited his 2 friends and as well Cassie's classmates, Brian Draper and Tori Adamczyk. I hope this is how you pronounce his last name, I'm not sure. And those two boys, they were also 16 years old at the time. Brian and Tori were also students at Pocatello High School, same like Cassie and Matt, so basically all four of them were kind of friends with each other. But Cassie was not too happy that Matt brought his two friends with him. I guess she was just looking forward to have some alone time with her boyfriend. And also she asked only for permission if her boyfriend Matt could come over, but she did not ask for permission if any other people could come over. So Cassie wanted to be responsible, and she really did not feel that great about the whole situation. Nevertheless, Cassie let them into the house, and she even offered them like a little house tour where she would show them the house essentially, and as well the basement of the house. After the little house tour was done, all four of them gathered together in the living room, and they were watching the movie Kill Bill Volume 2. After some time, however, Brian and Tori got a little bit bored. I guess they were just expecting some kind of house party going on over at Cassie's house, because all this whole house was to herself that night, so they wanted to have some fun. But this was not the case, so eventually, after only approximately an hour of them staying, both of them, they left the house saying they want to go to town, they want to go to the local movie theater and rather watch a movie down there instead. While Cassie and Matt were now staying alone in the house, the lights in the whole house went off for a brief moment before the power turned on again. Like it was kind of like a power outage. And Cassie began to worry that this would happen again after Matt would leave her. And she was, of course, like she was 16 years old, she would be all alone in this big house. And she was a little bit scared of the dark as well, so she did not feel comfortable. So Matt phoned up his mother, and he asked her if it was okay that he stayed the night with Cassie so he could comfort her, she would not feel so alone. But Matt's mother said that Cassie was welcome to stay the night over at their house, but Matt was not allowed to stay at Cassie's house. Eventually, Cassie agreed that she would stay back at the house alone because she did not want to drop her responsibility of taking care of the pets as well. And after both of them finished the movie night, Matt headed home to his house and he left Cassie behind. On September 24th, 2006, so it was Sunday now, 2 days later, Cassie's relatives came back from their short trip. Once they entered the house, it was Cassie's 13-year-old cousin who discovered Cassie's lifeless body lying in a pool of blood on the floor in the living room. An autopsy was conducted later and determined that Cassie had been stabbed a total of approximately 30 times, where 9 to 12 of these wounds would be fatal. Of course, police officers have been called to the crime scene, and they found some traces in the house that indicated that there was a fight going on. So essentially, Cassie was fighting back her attacker and she was fighting for her life. Despite the chaos in the house, police were not able to find any signs of forced entry to the home, and they were also not able to find the murder weapon. Since Cassie's boyfriend Matt was reportedly the last person to have seen Cassie alive, and since there was also no signs of forced entry to the home, the first trace led police to question Matt, firstly just as a witness, but also as a potential suspect. Police also decided to conduct a polygraph test with Matt, and while Matt passed the polygraph test without any flaws, it was what he said during the polygraph test that would later go on in solving the case. While Matt was sitting there doing the polygraph test, he told the investigators that it was not only him on Friday evening in the house, but also that his friends Brian and Tori were at the house for briefly around an hour. So now, of course, it was also Brian's and Tori's turn to be questioned by the police. The two teenagers were questioned, and they claimed that they were at Cassie's house, but only stayed for about an hour when they decided to rather head to the local movie theater instead to watch a movie there because they were bored at Cassie's house. When they were asked which movie it was they actually saw that night, none of them was able to remember the name. So investigators would ask Do you remember any actors in the movie? Do you remember what the movie was like briefly about? But none of them were able to remember anything about the movie. Now this of course raised some red flag for the police, because it was just 2 days ago, and Brian and Tori were known as like movie geeks, you would call it. Like, they were very fascinated by movies, like they were so interested in movies, and it was very weird that none of them were able to remember anything about the movie they just saw it 2 days ago. So investigators went down to the local movie theater, and they questioned the employees who were working there Friday night. The employee who was sitting at the box office, so who was selling the tickets for the movies and who was letting the people in, she actually knew Brian and Tori because she went to the same high school as them. The employee was certain to have not seen either of them, neither Brian nor Tori, during the night of the murder. So Idaho State Police Captain John Gansky, he was one of the investigators in the case, and he would later say in an interview, "They were lying to us. Now we have to figure out why they were lying to us." The investigators started to confront the teenagers with their lie, and it was Brian who admitted first that he did not go to the movies that night, but instead he was breaking into cars and he was afraid to get into trouble for that. This is why he put on the lie. Now, investigators were not convinced by Brian's story, and they requested to conduct a polygraph test with him. By the thought of going through a polygraph test, Brian became very nervous and his behavior changed. Before the test was even able to begin, he said that he needed to talk to the investigators. Once his parents joined Brian in the interrogation room, Brian started to confess. Brian said that Matt, when he was leaving Cassie's relative's house the night of the murder, actually called Brian and Tori to tell them, "Okay, I'm leaving now as well. Maybe we can meet up later. What is your plans for the night?" When Brian and Tori answered the phone, they were only able to whisper on the phone because what Matt guessed so, they were in the movie and they were not able to talk loudly on the phone. However, during this time, they were already in the basement of Cassie's relative's house. Cassie had showed them the basement earlier during the night, and while the two boys were still at the house, Brian said he had to go to the washroom, but instead he went down to the basement and opening the back door for them to come back later the night. Brian stated that it was the initial plan to scare Cassie and Matt a little bit that night, so they were the ones causing the power to go on and off, and they would make some noises in the basement, and they really just wanted to scare Cassie. But at some point, both of them ascended the stairs from the basement up to the living room, and they were still able to hear Cassie yelling, "Who is there?" Disguised in masks and dark-colored clothing, Brian and Tori attacked Cassie, stabbing her multiple times with a hunting knife. After killing Cassie, Brian and Tori fled the scene in a vehicle and started to record a videotape, which would later be released. In this tape, Brian could be heard saying, "I just killed Cassie. We've just left her house. This is not a fucking joke." Brian went on to say some more sentences in the videotape, and all of a sudden Tori was heard in the tape telling him to shut up and we gotta get our act straight. The two teenagers then went on to drive to Black Rock Canyon, where they buried the evidence, including knives, masks, and the videotape. On September 27, 2006, Brian led the investigators to the place where they buried the evidence, and both Brian and Tori were arrested and charged with first-degree murder as well as conspiracy to commit first-degree murder. During the trial, first of all, both Brian and Tori started blaming each other for the murder. But when the videotape was shown and analyzed, footage was seen where both of them planned the murder together, and they started actually to record the tape already prior to the murder. So like the actual murder was not recorded on the tape, but there was footage from before the murder where they planned everything, and also after the murder where they said they just killed Cassie. Both Brian and Tori were talking on the videotape about being inspired by famous murderers like Ted Bundy or the Columbine shooters, Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, as well as their main inspiration, which was the horror movie Scream, where two teenagers went on a killing spree on their friends. They selected Cassie as their first victim simply because the opportunity was presented themselves. Like, she was alone in the house and she would be an easy target for the first murder. They admitted that they initially also planned on killing Cassie's boyfriend Matt that night. However, that plan changed when Matt was not able to stay the night. On the videotape, the two boys were seen capturing themselves in the high school library, creating a death list. And you could even see Cassie in the video, like she came to the camera, she was waving to the camera and saying hello. At one point in the video, which was recorded shortly before they entered to the basement in Cassie's relative's house, one of them said to the camera, "We're sick psychopaths who get pleasure of killing other people. We wanted to be just like Scream." Brian and Tori admitted that they killed Cassie simply because they wanted to become famous. Based on both the now mountain of evidence and as well as the confession of Brian, on August 21st, 2007, both Brian and Tori were sentenced to a life sentence without possibility of parole on the murder charge and received additional 30 years to life for the conspiracy to commit murder. Brian and Tori are currently to this day serving their sentence in the Idaho State Correctional Institution. So shortly after both Brian and Tori received their life sentence, they went on to appeal their sentences, like most people do. And Brian's appeal was set on the ground that there have been multiple errors and inconsistencies in the process leading to his arrest and the trial itself. For example, Brian claimed that in his fourth interview, before he was arrested, his parents were not present in the interrogation room. And therefore, any information investigators received from that interview should have been suppressed. The court, however, found that everything done in the interview had been done correctly. Brian was read his rights prior to the interview, and he even signed a waiver for the same. So this appeal was denied. Tori's appeal was made on the grounds that he never directly admitted to having actively stabbed and killed Cassie. Yes, he was shown on the videotape planning the murder, but he never confessed to actually have been the one stabbing her. The only one admitting to having stabbed Cassie on the videotape and also in his confession was Brian. He also appealed that when a warrant for his house was served to go through his belongings, this warrant did not specifically say that the authorities had the right to go through his computer. However, this is what they did, and where they actually found child pornography and animal cruelty. Tori's defense essentially claimed that this evidence found under the warrant should have been suppressed because the warrant did not specifically say that his computers could have been taken from the home and being searched. The court obviously disagreed, and this was a search warrant for his house, and his computer obviously was in the house, so the appeal was also denied. More than 15 years after the murder, Brian Draper actually agreed on conducting an interview out of prison where he claimed he regrets what he did every day of his life. Brian said, "I felt like a nobody, and I felt like I'd be somebody if I did something, big and bad." He also went on to say, "It's not too late for all the kids out there who are thinking about doing that stuff now. It's not too late to get engaged in your life and try to improve your life and better your life." While this may be true for other kids, it is definitely too late for Cassie. And this is the cruel story about the completely unnecessary murder of Cassie Jo Stoddart. And this murder, it did not only take Cassie's life way too soon, but it also affected her family very badly. After the murder, Cassie's aunt, Allison, she lost her job and she fell into a very deep depression. She was probably blaming herself just every day for what happened because she let Cassie stay alone in her house. Cassie's cousin, who was the one who actually found Cassie's body, attempted to commit suicide, but luckily this was not successful. Cassie's aunt and uncle stated that the house has once been their dream house that turned into a nightmare. They were trying to kind of move on with their life, like they wanted to sell the house, but for years nobody would buy the house. I would just like to extend my deepest sympathies for Cassie's family, and I really hope that they were able to make some peace wherever they are now. And this is all from me for today. Thank you so much for tuning in once again. Once again, I'm really sorry for my inconsistency in uploading. I'm really gonna try to better myself. And in the meantime, I would really appreciate if you could like this video, if you would subscribe to my channel, because I promise new videos are gonna be coming. Thank you. Bye.